Okay, so Fortinet, you fairly recently published your annual skills gap report, and it'd just be good if you could say a little bit about the key finding, which I think was to do with the link that was uncovered between security problems of various sorts and the skills gap. But yeah, if you can perhaps just expand on that.
Yes, I think what's interesting is the days where you would finger point a single product or a single person, or you think it was just bad luck or accident and you have to forget about it and move on, are gone forever. There is now a systematic, holistic view of the fact that you might be broken in or you just been broken in has to do with a series of parameters. We call it the holistic view of cybersecurity, and that includes more and more the human factor. And it's not a human factor like, oh, Mr. Alsop is not good enough, and we need to find Mr. Alsop too, possibly the clone of Mr. Alsop. It's a holistic view that you have, like you do with typical technical vulnerabilities. You consider the fact that as a whole, your team, and not only the IT and SOC team and NOC team, it's the extended team, marketing, sales, legal, even HR, has not been properly or regularly trained. Hence, you carry with you a systematic vulnerability, and that plays a role in the fact that your overall risk is increased. And that version, that edition of the skill gap makes it clear that companies across the piece, and remember, this is a global survey, do consider the training and the skill gap as a whole problem, as part of the global vulnerability. And that to me is a major step forwards. And if I had one thing to remember, there are many things, it's a rich survey, but one thing is this holistic view that includes the human factor as part of the ecosystem of risk of cybersecurity in the world.
Okay, and perhaps before we drill down a little bit more into the results, clearly the breaches, as you said, yeah, they happen, and the repercussions are serious. Perhaps you can, I know, we get the headlines, all these huge sums thrown around, but perhaps you can just sort of put in perspective how bad the consequences can be when organizations are breached.
What's interesting, even in the wording of your question, is you've pronounced the word of risk, which is you turn into something that is financial, that is time, that is human, things that were until lately considered gigahertz, megabyte jargon. So there is a new language that a CISO, a CTO, a CIO have had to learn, which is the language of risk, which is turning all these events, and there can be thousands of NOC events, into what risk do they represent for the company. And the second aspect of your question, correct me if I'm wrong, is that over risk is increasing. And yes, we see more sophisticated, more systematic, and more devastating scenarios of attacks. And certainly we have, as you probably know, we scrutinize the threat on a daily basis. We have a team of 600 people. They're not doing system engineering. They're not doing pre-sales. They're not doing post-sale. They're just passionate about finding what's going on out there, right? And they are, of course, now seconded by artificial intelligence, because they have to sort what they know from what they don't, what looks like an attack and what isn't, that we call the false positive, but what doesn't look like an attack, and that is an attack, that we call a false negative, which is perhaps the most devastating concept we can use. Oh, I'm fine, and in fact you've been attacked for a few hours already. So yes, we see that sophistication being more and more systematic, being more and more, we see it changing in nature, not only in volume or in sophistication. We used to have a bunch of guys that were doing that for the fun. This is perhaps 20, 25 years ago when I started in this domain. And if you say, okay, I'm Joe, I went there and you're not supposed to have access to this file, you had fame, and that was all you wanted. Then we had what I call the business side of cybersecurity, where you're actually making money like an industry. Say you want to create your own attack, you would buy, like in a supermarket, a vector, you would buy a ransomware engine, you would buy a few IP addresses that, so you just exactly like you go into with your trolley, you would glue that together and say you don't get the return on investment that you thought. You have a call center and you have a customer number, and you say, look, I'm not getting what I wanted from that. And there are actively people that would help you, like they would assist you in a typical business to just make a better return on investment. And they are very skilled people. We're talking about the skill gaps. We hiring some of them when we can. And here we go. This is and then third generation, and it's not because one generation arises that the other one disappears, by the way. It's what we call the bandit state-owned cyber attacks. So these guys are not looking for money directly. They're looking for attacking, devastating your critical infrastructure, like energy, like telecommunications, like healthcare, like supply chain. And they are very skilled people, very organized people. We can see that they have more technical resources in terms of CPU, in terms of ability to mask their activities. And they are here to kill. They are here to make things like a bomb, not recovering. So they would not ask you for money to recover. That's another breed of attacks. And yes, we see more of them. We see more systematically some of them. And they are using, as far as we can see, more and more sophisticated technologies as well.
Okay, and in terms of the sort of the skill situation the survey looked at, I think it concluded or found that there's a great deal of importance set on cybersecurity certifications. So that is, I guess, understanding what skills your workforce or individuals have. So why do you need that? Whether it's I guess it's not a piece of paper these days, I'm sure it's a virtual system, but why do you need that sort of proof of skill?
There is an upside of that, and there is a downside of that. Let's start with the upside. It's become a professional activity. We saw in the attackers are becoming professionals, and obviously the teams. It's now a profession. Okay, so like any profession, you have certifications, and you need to be sure that the people that you are going to hire are familiar with the technologies that are involved into the recent attacks that you see. Problem is, most of this technology just did not exist when these people were in the university or just in the latest training. So it's certainly a good approach to say, okay, I want someone that is certified, let's say, in 5G, someone that is fluent in cloud, distributed engine type of mentality. But at the same time, how do you make sure, let's say 5G, industrial 5G, right? First of all, you see a CV coming to your mailbox. I have 5 years of experience in industrial 5G. Can't be true, right? It's just 5 years ago, there was not such thing as industrial 5G. I saw the rise of industrial 5G in the 2 last Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. And then I was in front of me, oil and gas companies that were creating their own private 5G network because they found it more resilient and many other reasons than a typical Wi-Fi industrial. Rightly or wrongly, and sometimes rightly, they were having the support and say, where can I find these women and men? And say, I said, you can't, right? And now, how do you deal with that? how do you deal with the fact that most of the technologies that are involved in the attacks today, and that will be involved in the attacks tomorrow, just did not exist before? But what I've seen being the most efficient, first of all, there's no panacea, there's no easy answer to that question, but there is an approach that I've seen being proven efficient. It is go for the science that underpin the technologies and not the technology itself. I would hire Alan Turing as a CISO today. He would be a brilliant CISO, and he knows nothing about 5G. He knows nothing about LDAP. He knows nothing, but he's got the scientific background that underpins, because at the end of the day, we're talking mathematics and physics, algebra, combination, probabilistics approach, inference engines. These are mathematics concepts. So he would be brilliant. For some reason, Mr. Turing doesn't answer my emails recently. But the principle is go for what underpins the technology. Don't get dragged away by just the acronyms. And then you find people that will have the intellectual and scientific building blocks to approach the upcoming technologies. And in fact, they would be more fluent in what's new than the people that were fluent in what they knew before. In fact, what kills you is not exactly what you don't know, is what you think you know, and it's not true anymore, because you think you're protected. And this is where you are the most vulnerable as a company, as a team, as a NOC team, as a SOC team. Another dimension is, I truly believe that the cyber officer of tomorrow would be equally fluent in his own industry that she or he is in the technology, in the pure cyber technology. And there is one human reason for that. It is when you have to deploy a new strategy, a new cyber strategy, the first thing you have to do is to rally the rest of the teams to your cyber new strategy. Because if they push back, because you're not able to translate in their own industry terms the benefits or the additional protection that you're bringing, they would just push back. 60% of the big security transformation are enormously delayed, which is a euphemism to mean they don't work, because they've been pushed back by the operations. And when we talk of the operations here, I'm not talking about the security operations. I'm talking about the guy who manages an oil and gas, excuse me, an oil and gas manufacturer or a line of production. These people have been doing very well, thank you, for the last 60 years. Okay? So they don't want to be lectured by a young genius that doesn't get what their industry is all about. So equally, within the cyber skills, there is the skill to understand and to convert into something that makes sense to the operations. Take the example of a press group. You would be writing or recording an article like this one, and then you have to very quickly post it to your server because it's going to be published somewhere. And all this system asks you for a double authentication. It bothers you, right? Now, if someone can explain you in terms of pure press logic, how is it important that someone does not sign the article for you, or that a bandit artificial intelligence will not extract what you've just written or recorded into another content that will be phrased differently and positioned into another newspaper? Maybe I'm looking into that token and I stop complaining about it, because this is my job. This is my intellectual property. This is my company. So what I just did is to try to phrase into something that makes sense in your own activity, a reality that initially was a cyber technology activity. Then you get it. Right? And we need these skills as much as we need people fluent into configuring a firewall. We need these people that can rally opinion within the company and outside the company as well. But as you can guess now, none of these skills were in the job desk of a super SOC manager. So this is where the skill gaps also needs to be fulfilled, and explaining the new culture and what is at stake when you make people a little bit more cautious when they do their own activity, or maybe sometimes the authentication will be a bit slower. Oh, maybe you will not be granted access to all the resources that you used to have access with only password or only VPN that you rise on the Monday and you just don't worry about until the Friday night. Okay, you need to be re-authenticated, even if you just a few hours ago entered your credential. You might be asked to do it again, and it's not an error, it's not a bother, it's not. It's actually vital nowadays, because in the meantime, someone could have stolen these credentials and would be accessing the resources that are purely yours. And it could be someone from outside your company, it could be someone from inside your company, because the insider threat is as important as the outsider threat nowadays. So certainly we have to deal with a larger training spectrum in recruiting these people that we used to do. But if you take this hypothesis that if you had to be fluent in artificial intelligence and fluent in pharmaceutical because you are going to work, sometimes the second criteria is even more important than the first, because someone that is fluent in pharmaceutical will eventually learn cybersecurity. Whereas the other way around, I found it more difficult, more challenging. The super genius of, I don't know, MFA might never get it in a bank. He might never be able to rally an agency director that is sitting in Singapore and that you are deploying an SD-WAN without warning him or her. So the skills spectrum is deeper, but it's also larger. In what I mean by that is it embraces a larger number of disciplines that were not initially part of a typical cyber officer background. And part of these disciplines are the legal dimension. I wasn't hired because I was a good lawyer. None of my colleagues, as far as I know, in my generation, were never hired because they were fluent in legal. We saw, perhaps I shouldn't say that, legal as a necessary evil only 25 years ago. And now, legal is absolutely fundamental. It's not just a bunch of regulation that makes your life a misery. It's about protecting yourself as an individual. It's about protecting the intellectual property of your company. It's about making sure that your customer credentials would not find themselves on the dark net the moment they have made a transaction. And that framework is actually a great opportunity. It's a career opportunity as much as it is a technical opportunity, because now you have your seat in the boardroom. Now someone actually asks you, can we buy this company? Which is a question you were never asked only 10 years ago. If you were already a CISO or if you were part of the IT team. And just looking around, it is talking to me, right? The big guy is asking me if we can buy this company, because the cybersecurity posture and the skill set and the training levels and the various indicators of the cyber health of the company we are considering buying are so under our criteria that even if they represent, let's say, a potential business opportunity, we need to make the due diligence, integrating now those notions of cyber risk. And that is a passionating job. When you are invited to talk to the stakeholders about what happened. It is a seat, it is a voice, it is a tribune that you were never accessing in the past. So your intellectual scope, your professional scope increases as well as your responsibilities increase. So, and that is a message that we have to express louder, because we need to trigger the propensity or the desire or the vocation to come and work in cybersecurity. It is not just a bunch of geeks with a hood on the head in a dark room. These are people that are really part of the company strategy. These are people that are not anymore the Mrs. No or the Mr. No's of the party. You can't have this new device, and I want this to be collaborative, and we have to turn down this new software here. You're actually, it's a little bit like you offering a better braking mechanism into a Formula One, so the trajectory can be bolder. And you can take actually a bolder risk from a business perspective, knowing that you have a holistic cybersecurity. You can dare to ask or to exchange with third party. You can dare to have your customers, like some companies are already doing, piloting the production. Because you know you have a proper segmentation, you have a proper response time, you have a resilience plan. So you can take that risk, exactly like a pilot can take the risk to have a bolder trajectory in the corner. You can have a bolder approach of your business, knowing that you have a good cybersecurity. So if you have those skills, you're part of the strategy. You're making things happen that maybe not happen in the very core activity of your industry. And you're not just a Mr. No that looks into a technical dashboards and say, no way, these days are gone. It's not sustainable. It's not even desirable. We used to pronounce sentences like a zero risk strategy in the past. You may have heard that. Zero risk strategy means only one thing in a very competitive world like the one we are in, is zero business. You have to take those risks, but you have to take measurable, cognizant risk, documented risks, dashboard risks. And you need a cybersecurity that operates as a partner to this risk strategy, as much as someone that protects your infrastructure. So you see, it's a richer, more interesting, more risky, because you're exposed. But in my opinion, a new generation of profession that arises where the knowledge of the vertical knowledge of the industry you're in is as important as the technical expertise of the cyber technologies. Also, that is part of the job description.
Okay, and in terms of the skills gap, I mean, you've outlined a sort of, shall we say, innovative, radical approach to addressing it, but I guess how bad is the situation, the skills gap, and the way you've outlined it, is that the way to ensure that the situation is addressed, or are other things required, or just this sort of slightly left field thinking that you're not looking, as you say, for geeks with sort of whatever it is, cybersecurity pieces of paper, but people that are got the right mindsets, or as you say, know their industry sectors. So just, I guess, how bad is it and how easy is it to solve, I suppose, is the question.
It is challenging. I've heard that there are many millions of open jobs. Open job meaning you've done your part of fighting with the board to get a headcount, right? You've done your share of fighting with HR to get the job description. You've done your job of begging the budget to hire this expensive profile, and you just can't find the person. You see weeks pass and months pass, and you say, I can't find it. And the next wave of maybe a higher freeze would prevent you from hiring the person. That is, if you just look into cybersecurity I want to hire the clone that the people who is leaving, or the people who is retiring, or the people who works for the competition across the street. Now, if you have this holistic view, if you take the time to perhaps look inside your company, where you find this vertical knowledge that I was talking about, that is becoming so crucial to rally people to understand, to deploy the cyber strategy. And maybe you take the time to train that person. I was discussing with a very big authority in Saudi, and they, that illustrate the fact that people used to look outside. I can't find that profile. Yes, you look at just the pure combination of skills that is involved in a NOC manager today and say, I don't have that. Right. And you hired from abroad. You hired very expensively from abroad. And after a few months, you say, it just doesn't fit in. Right? And the person can be absolutely fluent in those technologies that were on the job desk. But it doesn't make that person the leader, the opinion leader, the actual charismatic manager of cybersecurity that a purely digital company needs to succeed. Right. So this is how bad it is. You ask the question how bad it is. It's a change of mentality that is needed. And also, we have to say, we've not been very good as an industry to explain how attractive and how innovative and how much of a springboard in a career can be a dozen of years spent in really managing a cybersecurity strategy in a company. We don't explain enough as a whole, not systematically enough as a whole, the fact that we will need people that are not only fluent in technology, but horizontal skills, charismatic skills, leadership skills, and a survey like the one we're talking about, the Skill Gap Survey, highlights the fact that there is a new breed of career emerging where people need to be fluent outside the pure expertise in cyber products.
Okay, and in terms of perhaps just more generally, I mean, cybersecurity as a topic was very sort of well defined, but now there's an increasing talk of cyber resilience, cyber resiliency. So it's not just cybersecurity, we're maybe looking at backup recovery, etc. And I know Fortinet, you have a sort of recommended three-pronged approach to cyber resiliency. So perhaps you can talk us through those pillars. I think the first one is in terms of helping or enabling the IT and security teams to get the necessary security skills. So perhaps you can talk to that.
Yes, we have to enlarge the spectrum of the way people exercise their skills within cybersecurity. And that's a cultural change. You can, and there's no conflict between this enabling your people to go farther than they used to go in discussing with one of your subsidiary about the segmentation of their teams, right? So should really everyone have access to everything? Even if you're a small subsidiary, a few hundreds of people, is that absolutely necessary? So you're starting to have a peer-to-peer, manager-to-manager discussion that you never had in the past, right? People would just say, no, I don't want segmentation because it's more convenient for my HR guys to tap into the marketing database and vice versa. And I don't want to frustrate my people if they cannot access anymore to all the figures of this is where you have to have that discussion, and you have to have this new breed of people. But there's no conflict between that and sometimes outsourcing a little bit or a part of it to a third-party professional that will come up with all the experience of the playbook into shaping the cybersecurity strategy, properly segmenting the functions, see the authentication strategy as part of the company strategy and not just a block on the road to productivity, etc. And as you go about doing that, this third party would write the first version of the playbook if you want. If that happens, this is where you have to start. You were talking about resiliency. Resiliency is not just technology must have. It's a legal obligation, which is the mentalities are changing. It's not if you bad luck happen to be broken in. It will happen. So show us what you would do in that, yes, unlikely, but not so unlikely case you'd be broken in that particular critical infrastructure. And show us you can recover. Show us you would understand you would be broken in. Remember, the detection, if you look at the time frame, the detection is by far the longest time. Just realizing what's happening to you is what takes the most time. In the past, it could be an average of 21 days. And now you can have that in hours, in minutes, right? So just understanding that time frame is really part of it. And the resilience plan is how do you prepare yourself how to the likely, unfortunately, likely case when there will be an attack, and show who is responsible, show what the line of command is, show what's the prioritization into what you need to ramp up once everything is down is one of the most interesting exercise into the resilience plan, to establish a resilience plan, because it forces the formerly owners of the ivory IT tower to speak to the operations. Because how do you know from just a pure IT perspective that this system is more critical than this one in the case that they will be all down? Well, you have to discuss with the business people. You have to discuss to the financial people. You have to discuss to the CEO and say, well, if I have to choose between my customer database and my production line, someone would say, you keep the production line on, no matter what. Someone would say, no. I want that customer database to be the first one to recover, because then I can communicate to my customers just to tell them what happened and that they have to change their passwords and etc. Right? And the law now forces us as a community to go into this direction. And part of the resilience plan, you have to say, okay, we've come up with the conclusion that it's 1, 2, 3 and not 1, 3, 2, or like it was in the past. No, everything is important. You cannot recover everything at the same time. So you have to make that choice. And the most interesting part is not the ending ranking, is the discussion you have between the operations and IT, between the marketing and security, between the subsidiary and the headquarters, between the financial guys and the marketing guys. And once you kind of have made this dialogue happen and crystallize that into a resilience plan, a recovery plan, who is looked at positively by the CEO? Because you've solved his best nightmare. My departments are working in silo and I don't have a holistic view of my business. And that passes through now by through the resilience plan. So all of a sudden, you were that geek sitting in this unknown place, and you become the one who solved one of the best nightmare of the CEO, which is horizontal communication and collaboration between the typical silos of the company. And then you realize why you're part of the board. And you own the right to say no or yes, or let's do it this way, the right way, right? This is why resilience is so important. For the question, it forces a company to ask itself more than for the answers it brings, because you have a consensus behind the resilience plan. And the consensus goes through and by the top of the company. Hence the interest, hence the intellectual interest of the job, hence the kind of universality of the cybersecurity. You know, sometimes I have the honor to represent Fortinet at the World Economic Forum. Right? This is a place where we could not enter 10, 15 years ago. There is this big circle of chiefs of states and big decision makers in Davos. And there's a second, this one we were never invited to. And then we have the second circle in the hotels, those who report to these guys. And we were not invited to this second circle either. We were saying, we do interesting things. Yeah. And now I am invited to do the opening presentation within the sacrosanct Davos circle. This is how much the mentalities are changing. And there is this book that the very founder of the World Economic Forum, Dr. Klaus Schwab, has written, which is called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. Basically, it says this is the merger of three worlds: the biological world, the physical world into which we live, and the IT world. And if that merger happens, if we secure the transactions, then it's a hope for humankind. Remember, the task of the World Economic Forum is just to enhance humanity, or it will be a total disaster, whether or not we can secure the transactions, the digital transactions that are underpinning the fourth industrial revolutions. So all of a sudden, we were the little geeks in the darkness, and we are in the spotlight talking about that. And that reveals how much the mentalities have changed regarding cybersecurity. And the skill gaps highlights the need for this new breed. Just to come back to the skill gap report, if you read between the lines, you see the mentalities changing. We're not there yet, right? We're not there yet. But there is something that is very interesting, is people now realize that diversity is key, not only because we have to tick a box in the diversity quotas, but because it brings a new intellectual view and not only a technological view on the problems that underpin the cyber strategy for a company. We need people that think like a hacker. We need people that think like a minority. We need people that have this ability in the ergonomy to spot some of the inherent vulnerabilities, because that person sees things from the distance and is not being breeded as part of the typical cursus university kind of a series of approaches. She or he all of a sudden brings a new light, and that enhances the security, a little bit like in the law enforcement forces, physical, in the police. You have people coming now from different backgrounds because they understand they were part of these guys that were in a minority, and we need them, that diversity, this intellectual diversity that is so crucial to hire and to find and to recognize the proper skill. Because in the past, someone that would have talked about how fluent they are in NIS2 or how fluent they are in legal in an interview to recruit a SOC manager, you would have gone, mm-mm. And now you say, wow, tell me more. Because I need someone that just can prioritize what NIS2 is requiring actually on me. And where is the risk in complying later? And how much is the risk in complying later? And what does really make sense for my company into these new sets of regulations? And someone that can do that, it doesn't really matter if that person is not totally fluent in industrial 5G. That is a scarce resources we should hire. And then we should train that person on 5G, because we can do that, right? Training now is a discipline. We are very proud to say that we don't monetize our training anymore. You go to Fortinet / network security experts, and you have an entire set of real knowledge training modules, and you don't need to pay for them. And there are 8 levels, and the 8th level, maybe around the world, I could name 100 people that have reached that level. But the 3 first They can be done by anyone. You don't need to be an IT expert to do that. You can be a marketing guy, and then you will understand why we segment. You can be a financial guy, and you understand why it's so important to authenticate. And these are truly basic cyber skills that raise the bar of the cyber culture and address the skill gap as well. A systematic, regular, in-depth, and vertical training is a necessary condition to bridge the skill gap.
And in terms of the other prongs, I mean, you've talked there as people are planning cyber resiliency, there's a lot of cross collaboration, so awareness of cybersecurity is there. But that's presumably at a certain level where those conversations are happening. But below that, there's potentially a need. I mean, we're all aware of cybersecurity issues, I guess, whether it's on our personal devices, etc. But is there more education needs to be done for the workforce to understand, when they get an email offering them something unbelievable, whether to be skeptical of that kind of thing, etc. Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to how important that part of the education process is.
Absolutely vital. You say below that, but it is below that things happen or do not happen. People would see things that you cannot see in your network operating center, headquartered somewhere. They would sense the risk better than you would, and then they can report them, because is that not suspicious? That my sensor of temperature within that process all of a sudden sends complex framework to this newly IP address that we've never seen before. Wow, you just detected a big breach, right? Or is it normal that this guy that comes once a year just to update the software has got admin skills, admin rights to do that? Ooh, you just spot, thank you, because I can't see that from London or from New York. I can't see that. This is happening somewhere in the desert, maybe. I was invited to the NEOM project as well, and it's amazing how seriously this country takes the OT challenge as part of the overall cybersecurity challenge. So yes, there is no below. Below is, forgive me, below is not the right term. It's the granularity of the awareness of the potential risk that makes the holistic view of the actual company risk. You just connect this temperature sensor, very good, increases the granularity of the gradient of temperature somewhere in a column, but there is no protection. It's a totally open network that talks to a Wi-Fi you never secure, you never chose, and yes, it's very convenient, but yes, it's very dangerous. And it is systematically scanned using artificial intelligence by the bandit states, by the way. So you don't connect anything to a network before you think twice about. It's so much more convenient when you have 100 cameras to deploy on the site to leave the by default passwords, right? So convenient. And instead of taking you 5 weeks to deploy, you deploy it in 1 week. And you got a congratulations from your operation manager, except you just open the doors. And there's so much you can learn by hacking a video camera. So much. So this is where you say below, yes, it starts with that. It starts that people who have no clue of cybersecurity that can become your best ambassadors once they're on board, once you've raised that level of cyber culture.
And the third prong, perhaps the most obvious, is clearly there's a whole industry of cybersecurity solutions out there, various platforms, etc. So sourcing and implementing that, and there's also, I guess, now we have the sort of emergence of MSSP, so there's a significant sort of outsourcing of the security aspect. So just your thoughts, and clearly there are, I can't remember last time I looked, there were well over 100 sort of categories of cybersecurity solutions, and I expect there's even more now. But is it possible to I know, and I think there are various associations, organizations that come up with some kind of a recommended sort of plan, but just your thoughts as to how easy it is to assemble a fairly robust cybersecurity
I have to say,
solution.
in general, they are very robust and skilled professionals, right? So it's always good to have these people look into your cyber posture in general and recommend a transition from a first state to a second state. It's always good. And there are lots of advantages of that. They would more rapidly spare the essential from the non-essential. They would have these legal skills that are now intimately associated to the practice of cybersecurity. You mentioned the resilience plan. This is very important. They would immediately spot inconsistencies between your digital transformation and your security transformation. They would have the right profiles in the right place and save you time. So all good from that perspective. They would be fluent in cloud. They would be fluent in distributed. They would be fluent in hybrid architectures, right? Because they've been there. It's not that they are intrinsically smarter. It's just they made all the mistakes for you not to make them, if I have to be blunt. But at the same time, it's not because you have hired that team that you're off the hook and all of a sudden cybersecurity is not your problem anymore. And if you have that by effect, then think twice, because you're still legally responsible as a CEO, as a CFO of the integrity of your customer and your operations data. And you can't say, no, not my problem, talk to this gentleman. I'm sorry, sir, you are the CEO. So we bringing you to jail, not this guy, right? It's your job if you want to sue him or her afterwards. But we, as the authoritative body of protection of information, and they are becoming more and more powerful and more skilled as well, we putting you in jail to start with. Okay? So lots of pros, but some traps into which we should not fall. Believing that it's not our problem anymore. Believing that they can cover the whole spectrum, right? They can't be fluent in pharmaceutical, you know. They may have customers already, references in that domain, but you are the one fluent in pharmaceutical as the head of a pharmaceutical group. They sometimes they can be fluent in a local legislation. It doesn't make them a universal knowledge in all the rules and regulations across the globe. So there is a local dimension as well as an expertise dimension to go with them. And you have to be sure that as they go about producing all the documents and implementing the strategies, they upskill your own team as well. So that you maintain, and this has to be put at the forefront of the contract, is upskilling my teams in those matters and not forbid my team to look into what they're doing, because what they're doing can be devastating and they can be doing in very good faith. Let's just take one concrete example. They call playbooks the series of steps you have to take in the case of an attack, right? And these playbooks are a great piece of intellectual property. Generally, they are all very good, but they would not apply 100% to your case, because you may decide, it's what we spoke about earlier, that this process is actually your critical process. This is what I want to protect in the unlikely, quote quotes, case of an attack. So you have to have an eye on these playbooks. You have to have the ability to shuffle a little bit the steps in the playbook. And you are the one who said, okay, now I want a drill. Just to see if that works, right? It's not because you pay them a lot of money and they are very knowledgeable and they have a great reputation. Put them at test And any resilience plan is as good as the drills that are underpinning it, because then you realize, oops, we didn't think about that. And then it has a positive effect in the way you organize your own teams. The resilient plan is a reflect of the vulnerabilities, not only the technical vulnerabilities, but the organizational vulnerabilities. A reporting line can be devastating if it's the wrong one. If all of a sudden the guy that has the ability to say, we stop the production line, reports to the production manager, the only answer he's going to get is no. That cost me $1 million a minute. You go back to your screens, right? So he has to report, reporting line, organizational resources, salaries, cultures, recruitment, all that is positively impacted by the permanent challenge between these MSSPs and your own business. It's a dialogue. It's a permanent dialogue. It's not, oh, you do that, and now I go about doing something else. That is the danger I see in outsourcing. But like I say, most of them are great professionals, and then they would offer you this as well. And if they don't, that can be an orange flag somewhere in your dashboard.
Okay, we're talking, if you like, at the beginning. I know AI has been around for quite a while, but there's a sort of huge explosion now, and we're talking at the beginning of that sort of explosion. And I've had conversations with people about quantum computing, which is sort of on the horizon as well, and there's talk about the post-quantum security world, etc. So bearing in mind where we are now, and when these things sort of come online, become mainstream, clearly things, the technology can be used by the good folks and the bad folks. But are you sort of optimistic that things, cybersecurity can be sort of, if not, you can't succeed ultimately, but you can do a good enough job or better than that to keep your organization running? Or do you worry that some of these technologies are going to be so powerful in the wrong hands that sort of disasters await around the corner, or with the proper, as we said, cyber resiliency strategy in place, you can mitigate most of those circumstances?
The way we approach the problem of the explosion of the new technologies that can be used as weapons is twofold. First is investment. We invest in research like no other company. We have 3 times more patents in artificial intelligence than all the rest of our competition, right? Sometimes we are, people say about us, which is wrong, by the way, but they have the right to say so, that we are not so good in marketing, right? But we invest most of our money in research and development and innovation. We address the explosion of potentially threatening disciplines such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing by really studying, innovating, and preparing ourselves to these emerging technologies. That's a very first important dimension. The second thing is there is no one technology, one product that can secure the state of the world. So even if we were the super quantum computing technologists, that would not be enough to secure. So we believe in what we call a holistic view of cybersecurity. It's only when you're, for instance, your sandbox, a sandbox is when you execute the code that you believe is potentially malicious. It's called sandbox because police used to have the bombs explode in a big sandbox when they found the bomb, right? So we call a sandbox an environment that we execute that code, that it really weird code that we detected. It's only when the sandbox talks to the firewall, that talks to the access server, that talks to the IoT management platform, that you have this holistic view that enables you to detect fast a threatening activity. But detection is just one part. You have to act. You have to correlate between devices that were never meant to work together. It's very bizarre that this pressure sensor all of a sudden sends to an IP we've never seen before. Or it's very bizarre that this protocol that we used to only do to manage this platform, now we find it on a place where it should not be executed, right? But you have to correlate that with what's actually happening in the firewalls, that segment, that production. So the answer is never a big black box that is so powerful. No, because this black box is only one part of the equation, and the nature of the threats we see happening is very sophisticated. It would use a vector, and that vector would sleep until a conjunction of other events make its presence here even more threatening. And it could have been sleeping here for hours, months, if not years. And then you have to make this complex correlation into which artificial intelligence plays a very important role to have a probabilistic value that is reliable on whether or not this is a threat. Because if you become too conservative into blocking every single stream of data that looks like something that used to be a threat only 1 year ago, you would put people out of business, and it would cost you a lot of money as well. So you have to be in a permanent balance. And that balance, you can't find it in the first place to start with. You have to learn your artificial intelligence engine on the data that is yours. And this is where outsiders cannot have the same ability to detect that something is wrong. And they can be deceived by your own holistic view of your own business. Typical example, in the past, you look at the edge router activity raising like hell in a few hours, and the presence of an encryption algorithm somewhere in the data. And that means ransomware, because this is what ransomware / DDoS do. They stress the edge protection, and they pass an encryption algorithm to get and increase the level of authorization. And that was enough to detect ransomware and to shut off that part of the IP range where you detected that. What if the production has just forgotten to tell to the CISO that is actually implementing this new encryption algorithm, and he believes or she believes in good faith that this is a great thing to do to encrypt the data, video stream encryption, for instance. Absolutely necessary. Yes, consumes a lot of resources. Yes, makes it more difficult to actually gather them, but so important, right? And it's a very legitimate activity. And you just shut off all the entire production line because there was an encryption algorithm, and it matches the older way. So in that sense, a holistic set of data that trains artificial intelligence technology to your case is one of the best protection against someone else that doesn't get it as well, and that tries to get in, and immediately his behavioral activity is detected as weird. And you can actually test it fast enough not to shut off all the company, and well enough to understand and segment where the threat is happening and continue the production in every other site where you have not detected this conjunction of factors. Right? So that is the way we see the solution. And the last thing, just to finish, is every time someone attacks one of our customers, we learn from it. Even when we stop the attack, he's playing it this way. And immediately we cascade this knowledge, this newly acquired knowledge, everywhere else. It's like someone tries to steal one of your cars with a scanner, and all of your fleet knows it. And say, when you have this protocol, when you have this request, when you have these characteristics of the incoming flow, that's a hacking, that's an attempt on hacking. And then you protect all your cars. Maybe you've been hacked once, okay? But the next car is already protected. And you know a lot, you learn a lot from the way you've been attacked. So it's like a permanent race of one who tries to crack in, and you detect and you protect. But by doing that, you expose also your defensive mechanism. So that bad guy learns from you, but you learn from him. This is why it's never, I tick a box of cybersecurity and of IAM. It will be a permanent race. It will be a permanent war between sophistication of the attack and holistic view of the response. And this is where I believe that the vision we have of, we call it the fabric, right? An intricate set of devices and technology that all bring a holistic view. We believe that is the way forwards, and never one black box that you stick in one place and say, I'm done. That won't happen, unfortunately.
Well, Alain, it's been brilliant to chat to you, and some really great insights into what's going on in cybersecurity and cyber resiliency. So I just really appreciate the time you give me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time as well, Philip. Any questions you may have, you can reach me.
That's great. Thank you.